The strange stalemate was over. The twins had made the big mistake Nipper was waiting for. LV confessed to everything, not just the plans for the Caruana murder but the suitcase murder too and the crossbow killing. Nipper had known nothing about these murder plans and until he searched LV's house, was inclined to treat him as something of a crank, but there he found the crossbow and the suitcase still with the hypodermic and the small bottle of cyanide. LV named Cooper as the brains behind it all, so Cooper was brought in for questioning. It was a story interview, Reed threatening to charge him straight away with 3 attempted murders, Cooper replying coolly that he could prove that for the last 2 years he had been working with the Yard. Cooper's story was as follows. He admitted that his first contacts with the twins had been criminal, during the days when he was marketing stolen Canadian bonds for them through his European Exchange Bank, but after this, agents of the United States Treasury Department discovered proof of his activities as a gold smuggler and offered him the choice of facing charges or working for them. He chose to work for them as spy and agent provocateur. He was controlled from Paris by an undercover agent attached to the United States Embassy. This man controlled the Treasury Department's work in Europe. His chief concern was combating the narcotics trade to the United States. The Krays' connections with the American mafia appeared important in America, and the Treasury Department was disturbed. Cooper had already been minimally involved since the stolen shares originated from a mafia subsidiary in New York. He agreed to keep in touch with the twins and keep the Paris embassy constantly informed of fresh developments. Meetings between the twins and Bruno and other leading mafiosi visiting London were all reported back to Paris, so were the Krays' involvements with the mafia over their London gambling interests. According to his story, Cooper's employers had allowed him considerable latitude in handling the Krays, and he went to great lengths now to win their confidence. He said his Paris contact knew that he was a US agent now, supplied the twins with the 2 Browning machine guns and paid for them from US government funds. He also claimed he had done his best to make sure that the other weapons he supplied were faulty. The .32 automatic which jammed when Reggie tried to shoot McVitie was one of his, so was the gun which failed to shoot George Dixon. He said that at the start the US Treasury Department had informed the Yard of his presence with the Krays. Rose, he said, knew all about him. He also said that no one at the Yard had trusted him. As a result, he had found himself in the unenviable position of the man on the tightrope, balancing between 2 homicidal gangsters who would kill him if they found out what he was. And all the time, the man in Paris wanted action. At first, he tried setting up the twins, involving them in some big crooked deal so that he could betray them to the police. Several times he seemed to have persuaded Ronnie, only to have Reggie stopping things from going any further. Then came the trip to Paris and New York, over which Cooper and the US Treasury Department spent a lot of thought. Cooper had flown several times to Washington to fix the details. The man in Paris arranged the visas, and an actor friend of Cooper's played the part of the killer from San Quentin to perfection. Cooper was hoping that once they reached New York, he could fix the FBI a grand slam of compromising link-ups with the top syndicate bosses of America. We were counting on Ronnie meeting Maya Lansky, the Las Vegas people, Angelo Bruno, and the Gallo brothers. But Ronnie was so hot that none of them would risk seeing him. As for the 3 murder plans, Cooper insisted that all of them had been essential to retain the twins' confidence. All had to be sufficiently feasible for Ronnie to think of Cooper as a fellow murderer. This was the basis of their friendship. It would have been fatal had he doubted him. The cyanide needed to be genuine, the crossbow capable of killing. LV too needed to be convinced that the murders were in earnest. Cooper could never risk taking an accomplice into his confidence, so he chose LV because he knew he was hard up but quite incapable of killing anyone. LV was such a bungler that anything he was involved in had to fail. Cooper had known the risks that he was taking, but his American employers still held the threat of possible imprisonment against him should he back out now. When he was with the twins, he was entirely alone. "The Americans couldn't help me," The yard didn't trust me, and I knew that once I slipped up with the twins, I'd soon be propping up a bridge somewhere. Reed was furious. Here was he working for 8 months on a major investigation of the 2 most dangerous men in Britain, only to discover that this so-called American agent had been quietly planning sophisticated killings with them. Backed by American government money, he had supplied them arms and machine guns, taken Ronnie to New York, and encouraged them in countless crimes. How true the details of Cooper's story were will always be something of a mystery. He claims that someone in the yard supplied him with information to pass on to the twins. The yard deny this. One police view of him is that he was a lone operator who had the nerve to play off the Krays, the American government and Scotland Yard against each other for his own interests. What is quite indisputable is that he was employed by the US Treasury Department, and that the killings and the crimes he helped set up for the twins could certainly have taken place with anyone but Elvie as the killer. It is also indisputable that part of Scotland Yard knew who he was. Cooper claims, "From the start, I was working for John Doe Rose." Quite how much that shrewd old man really knew about Alan Cooper is another of the mysteries of the case. When you ask him, he smiles enigmatically. Cooper is more specific. Doe Rose is straight and hard and 100%. He was the man who really caught the Krays, but even so, Cooper says he could not tell Doe Rose everything that he was doing. Doe Rose knew in advance about the New York trip. He knew the Paris agent personally and understood that Cooper was trying to implicate the twins. Beyond this, Cooper had been on his own. He felt he could not risk telling a soul in Scotland Yard about the murder setups because of the danger of security leaks. And John Doe Rose, it seems, had tolerated Cooper's presence, but not trusted him. Nipper had not been encouraged to get near him. Cooper had been a spy. A keen fisherman, John Doe Rose had known when to fish with several hooks. For all his resentment and dislike of Cooper, Nipper could not ignore him now, for Cooper had succeeded. By leading Ronnie Kray to Caruana and helping him set up a murder, he had produced the first real break in the twins' defenses since the investigation started. Cooper maintained that it had been a blunder to arrest Elvie, but for this one mistake, he could have delivered the twins red-handed to the yard for attempted murder. Now they were warned. Ronnie's great mood of daring, which Cooper had carefully built up, was dispelled. Reggie was back in charge and pulling up the drawbridge. There would be no more mistakes as the firm looked to its defenses. He offered to go back to Bethnal Green and try to implicate the twins again. He was convinced that he still had sufficient hold on Ronnie to make this possible. Nipper refused to let him go. Now he had Cooper, he was holding on to him. So while the twins were anxiously sending out spies for news, Cooper, the ex-gold smuggler, sat doing nothing in a small hotel in Kent. He had his wife, his Yorkshire Terrier, a police guard on the door, and a stock of Swiss cigars. Despite all this, he was soon bored and frustrated. Relations with Reed deteriorated. Neither felt the need to be polite. Cooper believed Scotland Yard was boneheaded, incompetent and inflexible. Nipper made it plain that Cooper was under his orders, that he didn't trust him and was making sure from now on that he worked for him. But Nipper knew that even now Cooper was still his best hope of catching the twins, for Cooper alone remained in touch with them. Every morning he had been ringing them from the hotel and telling them he wasn't well and so was having a short holiday in the country with his wife. Nipper had listened in to all these conversations. There was no mistaking the twins' eagerness to see Alan Cooper once again. This was what Nipper banked on when he made his plans to trap the twins. Cooper was told to play up his illness when he next spoke to them, saying that his stomach ulcer was causing him real pain. At the same time, Nipper booked a pair of adjoining rooms in a nursing home in Harley Street. Cooper was brought up to the Burford Bridge Hotel below Box Hill. From here he rang the twins again, saying that in the night his ulcer had burst. Ronnie was sympathetic and said he would like to come and see him. Cooper said that when he was a little better that would be wonderful. Next day he rang from the nursing home in London. Nipper prepared the trap convincingly. Cooper was in bed in pajamas, surrounded with flowers, medicine bottles, temperature charts. Nipper and his deputy Frank Cater were in the room next door recording everything from a microphone by Cooper's bed. Nurses and doctors were all taken in, but this time when Cooper rang the Krays, Ronnie was cagey and merely said he might be able to come round. Cooper was all set to do his best to incriminate him when he came, but late that afternoon it was not Ronnie but Reggie's friend Tommy Cowley who arrived. Cooper tried drawing him out about the twins, but Cowley was too sharp. He went back and told the twins that Cooper's nursing home smelt of police. From then on the line from Cooper to the twins went dead. The one success Nipper could claim for all his trouble was with little Joe Kaufman. While in New York, Cooper had made arrangements with him about another parcel of stolen securities from New York. Cooper was hoping that he'd bring them with him when he arrived in London. When Cooper spoke to him at the Mayfair Hotel, he learned that they were being posted. When Kaufman came to the nursing home, the police in the next-door room to Cooper recorded a lot of the conversation. May came and it looked as if the twins had got away again. All the conceivable ways of catching them seemed to have misfired. They were alerted now. Cooper could no longer get near them, and the real crisis was not for the twins but for the police. Nipper's investigation was now in its 9th month and seemed to have yielded all it could. As for the hope that the twins would make some fatal error if the police were patient, this no longer seemed feasible. The twins were feeling quietly confident and seemed to realize that, as usual, they had been luckier than they had any right to expect. Reggie felt safer with Cooper off the scene. Ronnie had a new blonde boy and was turning his attention to homemaking. Homicide could wait. The house at Byldston was looking pretty in the spring. Reggie was confident that nobody would talk. Furthermore, he had been hearing rumors of a despondent Nipper Reid. Maybe they were true. The twins spent the first weekend of May at Byldston with several of the firm. Violet, as usual, cooked lunch for them. The sun shone. Reggie felt that now that Ronnie had his country house, life could begin to settle down. Ronnie's great friend would soon be out of jail. Reggie might yet marry his blonde, live in the country and have children. It was Du Rose who called the conference on the twins. He knew that something must be done about them now if they were ever to be caught. As a policeman, he also knew that a point always comes in an investigation when one must cut one's losses. There had been blunders, but despite them, all the law still had some firm advantages on its side. Nipper's plan for using Cooper at the nursing home had not worked, but Cooper on his own could still provide the crucial evidence the police needed against the twins. There was the evidence of Elvie, there were the suitcase and the crossbow, and Payne could give his evidence. Maybe the case was flimsy as it stood, but these were serious charges, strong enough certainly to ensure that the twins would be remanded without bail when charged. This would immediately unlock the safety clause from Nipper's mass of statements. His undercover witnesses could make their statements openly and give their evidence to swell the charges against the twins. From then on, everything would depend on how much more the police could uncover. This was no cut-and-dried case yet. Superintendent Harry Mooney felt that once the twins were safely behind bars, he could persuade the barmaid of the blind beggar to give enough evidence to convict Ronnie of murdering George Cornell. Apart from this, the police still had little to connect the twins with their major crimes. It was an uncomfortable gamble to have to take. The twins had shown their cleverness in the past at dodging firm evidence than this. If they did this time, Scotland Yard, as one detective put it, might just as well put up the shutters and go home for good. But could the Yard be sure of getting even as near as this again? On the night of the 8th of May, 1968, none of the police from Tintagel House went home. John Du Rose and Reid had been there since early afternoon. With them were the other senior officers on the case: Superintendent Donald Adams, who had controlled the paperwork, Superintendent Harry Mooney, who performed much of the investigation, and Reed's assistant, Chief Inspector Frank Cater. Soon after dark, fresh police began arriving from the regions, more than 60 of them, all with their cars and two-way radios, none of them knowing why they'd come. Strict secrecy was preserved. Once they had parked their cars, they were conducted to the big main office with the view of the river, they were served sandwiches and coffee, and they were locked in. No private telephone calls were allowed, they were warned that they would not be getting any sleep that night. Soon after midnight the main conference began. John Doe Rose announced that the 3 Kray brothers and their gang were to be arrested at dawn. Some might be violent and the police must be prepared. The success or failure of the operation would depend on making sure that everyone on the police list was rounded up at once. In all, there were 26 names to be accounted for. Nipper spoke next, standing on a filing cabinet. He was crisp and lucid, very different in his young man's way from the old-style yardman, John Doe Rose. He was in his element, as the perfect staff officer, allocating duties and outlining the whole complex operation. 24 separate addresses all across London had to be raided simultaneously. Since early morning the Krays had been under constant observation. At the moment they were in a nightclub in the West End. When they went home central control would be informed. Provided nothing unexpected happened, all the arrests were to be synchronized for 6 a.m. No member of the firm must be allowed to warn another. Once they had been arrested, they were to be brought immediately to West End Central Police Station. Nipper had cards prepared with photographs of all the wanted men, along with their addresses and particulars. These were distributed among the raiding party. Somebody asked who would be going for the twins. That, explained Nipper Reed, was a privilege he was reserving for himself. The twins were entertaining Kaufman. They started drinking at the Old Horns pub off Bethnal Green Road at 9 p.m. It was a gala night. Ronnie was anxious to show Kaufman the two sides of London, the beery bonhomie of the East End and the bright lights of Mayfair. Kaufman was happy to be back in London, but both the twins appeared preoccupied. There had been rumours of further trouble from the police. Reggie suspected Cooper of fresh betrayals since Ronnie had found out that the office that he used in Soho was still heavily guarded by police. Reggie's girl was on holiday in Spain. Rumours were starting that the affair was over. At closing time, as they all left their private bar at the Old Horns, none of the firm noticed the courting couple in the back of the car parked opposite, a detective and policewoman from Tintagel House hard at work keeping the twins under observation. But at the Astor Club, Reggie was jumpier than usual. When the photographer kept insisting on taking flashlight photographs of him and his guests, he became aggressive. Ronnie calmed him down. Ronnie was happy. It was 5 a.m. before Tintagel House had its report that the twins and the firm had just left and were on their way home. Nipper was armed when they bashed the door at Braithwaite House 2 hours later and rushed in for the twins. It was not necessary. Both were fast asleep, Reggie with a girl from Walthamstow, Ronnie with his latest fair-haired boy. Reed had the handcuffs on the twins before they had really woken up. His was the first car back to West End Central.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.